Sarah,
Melissa,
what do you want to do tonight?
let's banter.
Sarah, I have to say, on this lovely evening, I've had a great couple of days. I'm feeling like I'm in a really good mood. And I would say, my cup is full. My cup is full figuratively because I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling alive. But literally, my cup is full. I have this beautiful old-fashioned. You can't go wrong with an old-fashioned, right? That's why they call it that. You just keep coming back. And it's delicious. It's got the cherries. It's got a little bit of ice. It's just the right amount of sweetness.
Was it a tall pour? This is
It
like
was
an
a tall
inside.
pour.
Tom
Yeah,
is known for his tall pour.
deep tracks tonight. What's in your cup? Is your cup full this evening?
Well, not only do I have a cup, I have a goblet.
My.
And oh my, if you can't see this, dear reader and listener, dear reader. I haven't even taken that many sips. My goodness, what is this going to devolve into? But yeah, so I've made a spritzer, which is kind of lame. But if I drink a glass of wine, I tend to drink them quickly. And then I want to have another glass. And by 2 glasses, I'm feeling it, man. I'm really feeling it. So what I've done is so that I can get a volume of drink, I make a spritzer. So it's red wine with seltzer. And it's super lame. It has ice cubes. You can probably, I don't know, the ASMR can hear my little ice cubes. Anyway, but it just allows me to like really have a long drink without getting, plastered.
You're
So.
playing the long game. I know. I feel like it's such a taboo thing about like putting ice cubes in wine. And I'm like, look, no judgment. I have a strategy at play here. This is not about class.
And it's not even a really great quality wine. So I'm not like really diminishing the quality. It's boxed wine. So
you're drinking a boxed wine spritzer, dear reader.
Yeah.
We've been both looking forward to doing this for quite some time. I think this has been a vision for the podcast because, quite frankly, we're pretty proud of these episodes that have been coming out. I think we sound really intelligent, but we edit them heavily.
Yeah. If you heard the raw footage, you may think differently of us, but
see how the sausage is made, as it were. So we thought maybe we would like let loose a little bit more, but we're definitely going to still stay, well, somewhat relatively on topic, talking about reading and books and our love for both and our love for each other.
That's true. What brought us together, the love for the book, the written word, and then the mutual affection we have for one another, which I think from the people that have listened that don't know us together as friends and only like say know me, it has been remarked upon that we do have a good banter and that you can tell that we've been friends for a really long time. And I can think of no higher compliment.
Absolutely. Yeah, that warms my heart. So now I have a full cup and a warm heart. So I want you, Sarah, and I'm going to really probe this as much as I can. I want you to describe your most ideal reading situation. So I want you to start out with the setting. Are you in a hammock? Are you in a bathtub, on a couch, a beanbag chair? Tell me where you are.
Okay. Well, first of all, I love a good probing. So I'm game to play. My ideal reading situation, I would say it's probably in a bed or on a couch. I am definitely laying down in a very comfortable position. I am completely and 100% alone. I don't even want anybody in the house with me. I mean, that never happens, but I mean, ideally.
Yeah, we're talking best case scenario.
Yeah, best case scenario. I'm all by myself. Yeah, I just have like unlimited time to just devote to whatever book I happen to be reading. Maybe have a cup of tea by the bed. It's definitely a bed. Let's not joke around. It's a bed. And, I'll get up every so often, refill my tea, get some more hot water in there. And yeah, that's it. Maybe it's raining outside. I don't know. I just picture it raining outside. So there's like a little gentle pitter patter on the windows. So it's just being completely and utterly alone. I can't stress that enough. I don't know why. And yeah, I'm super, super calm. Maybe I doze off here and there
Oh, okay.
because that definitely has happened. I mean, I'm really describing how I read most of the books that we read in grad school. I would
Mm.
be in my room, laying down with a hot cup of tea next to me, and it was in Newfoundland, so inevitably it was raining,
Yeah,
or at
on the
least
East
windy.
Coast, the
Yeah,
East
the
Coast of
East Coast. I
Newfoundland.
know. Yeah, West Coast, best coast, right,
That's
Melissa?
right. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're in a bed. Do you have a reading blankie? Like, do you even, or like jammies? Like, do you have a go-to comfort cloak?
Well, recently I ended up getting like a sweatsuit.
I love this. And I hope it
And
is velour and some sort of really obnoxious color with
no,
something
it's like
printed across the ass.
I am the juicy uh,
Reader.
reader. No, it's still like light gray. I'm so boring, but it is really soft and comfy. I actually had gone away on like a very small girls trip with one of my good friends, also named Melissa. Shout out to Missy, my friend Missy, not to be confused with Melissa, who is a big listener and fan of our podcast, which is really lovely. But we went away for her birthday, and I was like, what am I going to get? I'm going to get us matching sweatsuits that we can wear in the hotel room. And I fell in love with them. And like, I'm actually a little bit sad that I'm not sad at all, but I'm pretending that I'm a little bit sad that it's getting warmer out and that I'm not going to be able to wear them for several months. So I would definitely be wearing those. So yeah,
Okay, tell me then about the book. Hardcover, softcover?
hardcover soft, it doesn't necessarily matter, but I do find that sometimes like a hardcover book that's super thick can be a little awkward to be
Mm,
holding. My hand will start to ache from like holding it. And I'm like inevitably always laying on my side when I'm
mhm.
reading in bed.
What about length of book? And this is like I'm asking a question, I'm probing,
Mm.
but also I'm using it as an opportunity to talk about myself, which I have a really bad tendency to do. And actually,
I
sidebar, you know what I'm about to tell, don't you? This
I
story.
do.
So Sarah and I went to the Dominican Republic in 2019 dickety two. I don't, what year was it?
It was
2007,
two it was
2008.
it was 2008. April of 2008. We're actually celebrating the anniversary
Oh my gosh,
of
of
this,
course we
like
are.
yeah.
And you were reading Daisy Jones and the Six, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. I was reading I'm with the Band, which was by Pamela Des Bars. She was like a famous groupie from the 1960s and 70s. And it was basically like her memoir of all the like famous rock stars that she slept with. In particular, Jimmy Page was one of them, Keith Moon.
I believe the cover, though, very much resembled
It
Daisy Jones
does.
and the
It's like
Six.
a very like manic pixie dream girl in a little dress, like definitely same idea. By all accounts, like I'm sure there are elements of the Daisy Jones character that were probably based off of Pamela DeBars. I hope I'm not mispronouncing her names. I know that Penny Lane from the movie Almost Famous was definitely heavily
Mm.
influenced by her. So she is a very influential LA early 70s rock scene figure. So yeah.
All these years, well, not all these years, but recently, because Daisy Jones and the Six has been so popular, I've been like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, Sarah was so ahead of the curve on this book. She read that in 2008, in 19 dickety two,
I know.
on the beach. Anyways, I'm so far off topic now. This is like we're on point for being off point tonight. But
Yeah. Mhm.
so you read that book there, and I, rather than doing, I don't know that I did any reading on that trip because I dedicated my whole time to sunning myself. And
Yeah,
I was like,
getting a deep tan.
I remember having the approach that I was treating it like my job, that from 9 to 5, I would just be baking my skin. So you can imagine the tan that I had. I was
Beautiful tan.
so tan. And we lived in, at that point in time, the probably rainiest city in North America, the coldest, foggiest, darkest.
Especially
And
during that time of year, it's like the
oh,
most
yeah.
depressing time of year.
So we went for sushi and we were like, obviously so like delighted with ourselves that we had been abroad. And I was so tanned. And I saw one of our friends, Chris LeDrew, came to join us, who had not been anywhere outside of cold, drizzly St. John's. And I was like, oh my gosh, Chris, nice tan.
Yeah.
Be very clear that I was like, guys, someone should
Yeah,
comment on my tan.
yeah, like, come on, you too, Melissa, you've got a gorgeous tan. And that was like ongoing. There was like a good like couple months, I feel like into the summer where it was like, yeah, nice tan, Crystal Drew. Like, so it was always in reference to him so that you could fish for a little tanning compliment.
So in any case, I was asking you a question that then I was going to answer. And the question was about the length of the book, because my answer is I hate massive books. Hardcover, softcover, doesn't matter. Anything over like 350 pages, I just can't. It stresses me out. It feels like too much of a commitment. And my ideal reading situation would never have a book any more than, maybe like 300, 305. 305 if I'm pushing it.
I mean, there are some books that are like super long and I absolutely adore them. But I would say that my ideal length of a book is probably about like, I'd say like between 325, 350. Once it gets to like the 400 page range, I'm like, okay, it's just the time commitment. Like you don't have a lot of time to devote to reading and you want to get through something and there are other things you want to read. And if you're stuck on one book and it's taking you forever, yeah, you kind of start resenting the book.
Yes. And then you also hit like a point of no return. And I know this whole thing about like DNFing a book and empowering us to just like, you don't like it, don't read it. But you do get to a point where you're like, look, I'm this far. I may as well just carry on. Would feel like such a failure to quit. But the same with like a series. I remember when you were reading like the George R.R. Martin stuff way back, and you were trying to get me. What's actually? It's like Earth and Fire or Wind and Fire or something.
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Here I go.
A Song of Ice and Fire is what you're thinking
far
of. You had some of the elements in there. But yeah, those books are, I mean, there were some of them that were like behemoths to read, but you have to also be into that genre. I feel like I see in everybody's hands everywhere I go. And of course, it's like, I'm not going to be able to think of it now, but it's like
a Kotar.
Yeah, coat of
a
thorns.
Crown of Thorns.
I think it's Crown of
But it matches the acronym.
Yeah, but I see those books everywhere to the point where I'm like, should I be reading these? But then I'm like, the snob in me is like, no, you should not be reading those. Although we're talking about A Song of Ice and Fire like just a few minutes ago, and like I was all over that.
It's like I just never hopped on the bandwagons, and now I'm like, let me on your bandwagon. I want to play too.
I know.
But reading is just, I know it's cheesy to say, but it's just such pure bliss. Like when you've got a good book, even a slightly subpar reading situation, man, some of the best moments of my life have just been reading. No offense, everyone in my life.
Not the birth of my children.
Those are not great moments.
No, I know.
Shortly thereafter, great moments. Moment of their birth, not so much.
Yeah, I'd rather be reading a book. Thank you very much.
If you had to choose between laboring and delivering a child or reading a book, even if it was a 400-page book,
you would still read the book. Yeah,
10 times choose reading.
So how about you, Melissa? Like, do you have a preferred kind of reading environment or ideal image of what that would be?
There's so many different scenarios, right? Because there's like, it's almost seasonal. My Christmas reading by the tree is so different from like the summertime reading on a desk. But I do have like two that come to mind. And one is a little bit cheesy mama bear, and the other is probably like a bit more legit. But a beach read, there's a reason why beach read is its own term. Like,
that's true.
I read Room by Emma Donoghue on a beach on our honeymoon in Cuba. I'm not going to say that was the best memory of my honeymoon. Okay. I won't go that far. But I mean, I remember what book I was reading, and it was just so lovely because whenever you're on a beach, you've committed that you're not doing anything else. Whether you've got work to do, chores to do, commitments, like you're on a beach, you've given up on whatever else you're supposed to be doing. So you can really commit to the reading, like without feeling like, oh, I really should be doing the dishes or I really should be whatever. So that's like probably my number one.
But, and you love a good tan. So, I mean, it also allows you to do both.
It's like double duty. It's like multitasking because I'm clearly working on my tan, which feels like I'm accomplishing something, and then also reading at the same time. So it is kind of like a win-win. But now that both of my children are avid readers of long format. Now, they're both completely hooked on only graphic novels, which I'm cool with. They're 8 and 11. When all four of us are sitting quietly reading, I am probably at like my peak bliss point of
Oh,
adulthood. Like
yeah.
knowing that all four of us are just doing this and enjoying it, but we're in like a common situation, but separate little worlds. And every once in a while, someone might like laugh or like gasp or like, just some sort of reaction. And knowing that they're just like, they're feeding this love of reading, but also to go back to the same point as before, if your whole family is sitting and reading, you basically don't need to be doing anything else. It's not like, oh,
Yeah.
geez, the kids are doing a thing. I should really be helping with that. Or like, oh, Tom is like, folding laundry. I should really help him with that instead of being here reading. Like,
Mhm.
nope, we're all doing this. And so I would say those two reading scenarios, top notch for me.
Ah, I love that.
Yeah.
I will probably never have that because Josh is not a reader.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
not a reader, not a thing for him. William, I'm
Yeah.
really like fingers crossed that he loves being read to. And I think he does like story. He thinks about things because he'll ask me questions about something, especially if it's like a bigger theme that like he's kind of being introduced to. So I'm really hoping for him. But yeah, that sounds like so blissful. Like all four of you just together in the same room, you're spending time together, but you're all also kind of exploring other worlds and you can talk about it.
I
That
know.
really
And
is.
Violet and Douglas exchange books all the time.
Mm.
Like whatever comes home from the library, they just sort of passing them back and forth. So they have like this little mini book club. Like I realize I am
Ah,
so fortunate that they're both into like the same type of books and reading. Like it is like some of the purest joy I know.
ah.
So obviously we have this podcast that we always anchor to the core question of whether or not a book is a could read, a should read, or a must read. I want to continue probing full
Probe
cups.
away.
Talk to me about when you're determining what category you're slotting a book into. What's guiding the answer to that question?
It changes a little bit. Like I feel like it's a bit of a moving target, if that makes sense. Like I don't think that there are like hard lines between the three different categories. I mean, we don't have a category that is like never read, do not read, this book sucks. For good reason, I suppose, I think even if you write a book that people don't love, you as the author probably put so much of yourself and so much work into that, and to be able to like get that done and written and published, that should be applauded. And like for somebody to kind of poo poo all over it is you
Some
know
schmuck on the internet with 75 Instagram followers.
yeah, I know it's true. I don't know, but I guess it's just not my personality to do that either. So definitely the could read category does consist of, I think, in certain times, books that I would not necessarily recommend, or I did not personally enjoy, but I think if you were the right kind of reader for that particular book, that could be a good read for you, but it
Mm,
wasn't one for me. So I think that's where that category falls with me. The should read is, I think a lot of books probably would fall under that. It's like a bigger, like if I were to look at like how big these designations are, like the could read is, maybe going to be like a smallish to medium size grouping of books. I feel like should reads, there's going to be a lot of those. Like if I'm picking up the book because I read the blurb or was recommended in some way, there's a good chance it's going to be a should read. Like, and for me, that's like it was good. I
yeah.
liked it. I enjoyed the process of reading this book.
And
Was
like you
my
said, the fact that it even fell into our hands is not chance, right? Like, remember one
Yeah.
day I sent you a screenshot? It was like my Kohl's Indigo chapters, whatever this amalgam of stores is called now. And it was like, if you like this and this, because I had obviously been buying things and putting them in my cart, it was like other things you might like. And it was like all of the books that had been on the podcast
Yeah.
that we were reading. We're like, well,
Like,
I guess
okay,
the
well.
algorithms work. We're going
Yeah,
to
it's
be
true.
recommended books that the world, the internet, the universe thinks we'll like. But
Yeah.
yeah, so you're right. Way bigger category and way more likely that
Yeah.
something's going to find itself in there.
And then I think a must read is like either like I was in love with this book. I thought it was so well written. I love the characters. I love the development. Like there was just so many things about it that I just absolutely loved. Or a book that's going to stay with me for a long time, where I'm going to be thinking about it. I'm going to be thinking about the characters who I felt like I really got to know and felt like some sort of connection to. Or I feel like it's a book that if you read it, there will be some part of you or your world that will be like slightly changed. Like not big, you'll be a different person altogether, but that like maybe it'll kind of like turn a little switch on in your mind, or it'll make you see something in a different perspective. So that for me tends to be the must read category. And again, like probably not as big of a grouping.
No, it's going to take a lot for something to be a must read, really, for me. And I agree. And it's almost like I know what I would feel like on the last page. If I close that book and I make this sound like,
yeah.
I'm like, there's something there. And I have to confess, there is a ranking that we gave in one of the teaser episodes before we like officially launched. I wish I had given This Is How We Love a must read. We gave it a should read, and we were both, kind of ranking some of the shared reads of 2023. But I think about This Is How We Love a lot. I think it's kind of testament also to if you rank it too soon after, how do you know it will or will not stay with you? You haven't given it enough time to sort of sit. Initially, I thought could read was basically like a kind euphemistic way of saying like, don't read this book. Because you could be reading other books that are should reads.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that way anymore. Like, to be honest, a shared read that you and I have both read, Come and Get It by Kiley Reid, I would give that a could read. And not because I'm telling someone don't read it, but just because like it was fine. It was fine. That's how I would sort of classify that. What did you think of that book?
I did like that book. I wouldn't necessarily have rated it a could read. I think it would have fallen into the should read category for me. I really liked how she used dialogue. I thought she was really good at capturing how people talk. That's not an easy thing to do. And there was a lot of dialogue in that book. And I just thought like I could picture when I read that book what the people sounded like and what they looked like as they were speaking. I liked, I don't know, like this idea of being in university or in a college environment and how we try on different identities in those times. It's like, this is who I think I am, or this is who at this point in my life I'm going to try to be. I also think that, and this is one of the things I even like in some of the reviews I read, that this idea of the disparity in wealth and like how a college environment or university environment can really highlight that, because you have all these people kind of coming together into one space, living together, and you can really see that people come from such different backgrounds and access to wealth and how they wear that, how that shows up in their personalities. And I think I liked the idea of the Agatha character, who is like a visiting professor and author. And she's like a really interesting and prickly character, right? And it's easy to take advantage of your power in certain circumstances. And so I kind of like the exploration of all of that in that book. And so that's why for me, I think it was more of a should read than a could read.
And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but it's interesting to me. It struck me as a very distinctly American book. Obviously, I live in Canada, but I have lived in the US, not for an extended amount of time, but we're pretty much 3 years. And those 3 years were basically spent on a university campus. That's why we were there. So my knowledge of America is basically Target and a university campus, and a state university campus at that. So this book, I was like, I totally know these two scenarios. It was familiar to me. And to be honest, could read, should read, must read categorization aside, I think Kiley Reid's pretty talented, because I totally agree with your assessment of the dialogue, because it would be very easy to do that in a very campy kind of Sweet Valley High or something kind of like dialogue. But it wasn't. It was like very natural and very specific to a particular group of people. I moved back from the US in 2016, and people ask us about it. It's almost like we've lived in like a a foreign land. You're like,
Meanwhile, you're like, you were on the border. Like you were out there, like you could still see Canadian flags flying in like the town that you lived in. So
yes.
you were in the United States, and I mean, I do think as soon as you cross the border from one place to the other, it is distinct.
Yeah.
But you were even in a more like slightly toned down version of America than
Absolutely.
you know if you were like where this book is set, which is in
Louisiana, I think.
no,
No.
Alabama, Arkansas. Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
like the part of New York State where we lived, they actually referred to as the North Country. And I would constantly be saying, but
But there's a country beyond
this
this
country north of here. And we've been back living in Canada for 8 years. And anytime I am sad, cranky, irie, like whatever sort of bad mood I'm in, I crave going to Target. I can practically smell it. I do not know what they are pumping into that place, but it is potent, addictive, and powerful.
It's true. I mean, I definitely go to Target often. And when I leave, I'm always surprised by the amount of money that I've spent there.
If I had not lived there, I wouldn't get it. I'd be like, guys, get a hold of yourselves. It's just a store. Like it's Walmart. It's a slightly classier Walmart, but it's different. There's a Starbucks there. Like it smells like popcorn as soon as you walk in. Like they're doing it all right. But the thing about this book too, whenever I would try to like reflect on the book, I would just be like, there is too much going on.
There is. Yeah.
Everyone had so much trauma and backstory, and like there was just way, way, way too much. The only way I could kind of reconcile that was because she was talking about overconsumption. And I wondered if it was just like, I'm going to give you a ton of story because you want a ton of stuff. Here's a ton of story. But like, if you literally, like any one chapter was like, okay, we've got a girl. She's possibly a lesbian. She's trying to buy a house, but she's also done some pretty unethical things. But she has a lot of grief, a lot of trauma. Every single character was so layered with so much stuff that I just found it like, write 2 books. Don't write this one. Spread this out a little bit over a couple of books.
Yeah, I can see that.
I'm fairly certain she wrote this during COVID lockdowns, and it is conveniently / obligatorily set in 2017. So
as you were talking, I'm like, when was this book set? I couldn't remember. Yeah,
comfortably before the pandemic. But I do wonder, so I'm not like a writer. I'm not a writer, not like one, am not one. If just writing during that period was just like, okay, I'll give maybe a weird example. Like, do you remember mid-pandemic or like as we started to shift out, there'd be a bunch of shows on Netflix that were basically just indulgence projects of super famous people. Like, remember that Mike Myers thing that came out? And it was just him playing like 12 different people. Yeah. It was like, well, we can't hire other actors because we have a very small bubble and I need to have a crew. So it'll just be me doing everything. And there was another one that it was like a Judd Apatow thing. And they were actually in lockdown.
That one I think was called The Bubble.
Yeah. But I'm sure any of those people would be like, not my best writing, was kind of living in a bubble. And I do wonder if the type of writing that came out of the COVID times was a little bit different. But having said that, we've also read books written during COVID that are, I'm going to say it, remarkable. The Rachel Incident, must-read book.
Favorite read of 2024 thus far?
Yeah.
Just so well done. And it's interesting because Caroline O'Donoghue is kind of a part of like a circle of writers, and we've read their books as well. So it's Dolly Alderton, who wrote Good Material. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Monica Heisey, who wrote Really Good, Actually. Like the 3 of them are friends, and they all had books that came out within like, a year of each other, yes, I would say.
I read from Dolly Alderton's acknowledgments.
Right.
But in Caroline O'Donoghue's acknowledgments, so she does say, thank you to Dolly Alderton, who taught me that the smallest moments can be cinematic, which I actually really held on to throughout reading because I was like, she's right. They're both right. But then you actually sent me this in a text. And in the acknowledgments, it says, thank you to the only 2 WhatsApp groups I will ever respond to, The Tub and Monica's Ass. And I'm sure that must be Monica Heisey's ass.
Yeah, world-renowned ass, I hear.
I'm getting my hair cut in a couple of weeks, and the photo I'm bringing is a photo of Monica Heisey from Dolly Alderton's Instagram.
Oh, that's so funny.
I'm like, well, we're all friends. It's just a
We
couple of my
all,
friends.
yeah,
We're all
we're,
buddies.
yeah,
But
they've
I
gotten.
believe she did write this during the pandemic, this book.
Now that I'm thinking a little bit more about it, I think you're right. I think she had started off like with a completely different project that she was going to write, and then this story just came into her mind, and it does seem like it's at least in certain ways influenced by her own life. Certain ways. Like I'm not saying this is like this is not an account of her
Hmm.
life from 2008, because that is when the book takes place, which I think for me, like right off the bat, I was like, oh, well, of
Yeah.
course I'm going to love this book because 2008 was when we did our NI program. It was the last time I was a university student, and this takes place. She's in her last year of university and she's irresponsible. But what's kind of cool, because it is like a coming of age story, is that it's being told in retrospect. So I find like with some of these other books, even like Monica Heisey's book, the way that that story is being told, like there's nothing to reflect on. I mean, I guess towards the end, but for this one, she's in her late 20s, early 30s at this point. I think like probably 30. And she's thinking back to when she was in her early 20s. It's like 10 years later. And so even when she's recounting things that happened, there's a voice there saying like, this was painful and I would never have done this now. And I see how selfish this was. And there was something that I really appreciated about that it was so reflective. So she could see where all her faults were and where she kind of made decisions that were maybe not the best at the time, but that was who she was at that time. And it was just such a lovely account of friendship and the kinds of friendships that we develop when we're young. And because it's the only time in our lives that we can devote so much of ourselves to our friendships, like we wholeheartedly jump into our friendships, right? Our identity becomes our friendships, where we're moving away from our families and, maybe relationships, like romantic relationships haven't like come out into the forefront. And it's really those friendships that we develop and that become us in certain ways.
I completely agree with you that the way that she included the reflection, I thought, my gosh, she's talented, because every chapter would reset you. As you'd read, you'd get deeper and deeper into her recollection of what was happening, so that at the end of the chapter, you'd feel so immersed in that time, in the 2008
Mm.
timeline. At the beginning of the next chapter, she'd always remind you, like, no, I'm telling you this story. It's not 2008. And she would do it in a way that almost, not completely, but reminded me of how The Simpsons starts every episode, not where it's going, right? Like whatever happens in the opening scene of a Simpsons episode is so far from where it will finish, but it's kind of like a hallmark of the way that Simpsons episodes are structured. So every chapter would be like that. She would sort of like make this point, but it would really ultimately have nothing else to do with necessarily the rest of the chapter unless you dug really deep. But again, she was just trying to resituate you in like, I am telling you this after the fact.
It made me reflect so much reading the book about these times in my life. And I even think about like when I initially came to Newfoundland to like continue on my undergraduate degree and lived in residence. And that's when I met our friend Des, like someone that we're both friends with. And like I couldn't help but think about becoming friends with Des, how like there were times where like we were talking like one another. And what I mean is I was talking like her because she was so cool. And like the way that Caroline talks about James is the friend that she makes and is like kind of like a little soulmate for her. Like it reminded me so much about like when I met Des and like how I just wanted to spend time with her all the time and be like her. And
that's so funny because I think about my counterpart friend to your Des.
Lori.
It's
right?
Lori.
Yeah, I love Lori. Lori's great.
And I love Des and I love Lori. But yeah, it's like you and I were friends, but then before you and I met each other, like I had Lori and you had Des, but they never fully overlapped. Like I wonder if
They didn't. Lori came up to Newfoundland once and we had a wonderful time and I just loved her. And I remember like hanging out with her like at your wedding. And I just was like, when you have a friend who you absolutely love and adore, like I feel for you, and you meet that person's best friends and you love them too. And you just think, oh, well, this just means that like we truly are kindred spirits. If I love your friend, and I can get a little like catty and jealous, like I want to be the friend. Like I want to be the number one friend.
You don't know her like I do.
Yeah, I know. But like I just was like, oh no, Lori's like amazing. I love Lori. And like you met Des and hung out with her when we were in our grad program because she would come out sometimes with us. She would come to like parties or she'd come downtown with us. But life is so weird and funny. Like you and her ended up having babies within like a month of one another.
Mhm.
And you both had little girls and
In
you
the
both
same city.
in the same city and you ended up in the same like moms group. So you had a whole different way of bonding and like forging a friendship with her.
Yeah, love her. But this whole thing about like that you see Des in James, I so saw Lori in James
Oh, that's so
because
funny. Yeah.
we were roommates. Lori and I lived together,
Yeah.
and I loved the way that that book described the apartment where they lived. Like we
The whole
lived
like
in such a little dumpy little place. We
squalor. Yeah.
yeah, and but we loved it. Like it was our little paradise because we got to do whatever we wanted with it, and like
Mm.
it was really our first like big foray into having this space. And ours wasn't particularly cold, but I
Yeah. The way that
know,
she describes like it
yeah.
being like absolutely frigid. Like,
Well, we always slept in the same room. Like we had our own bed. Well, not always. I guess if there were gentlemen callers, we would retreat to our own spaces. But more often than not, we would sleep in the same room. Like it was just like a sleepover every single night. Like we just happened to live together. So I totally saw that. But I loved the descriptions of that place. Like just I could feel it. I could feel the cheap carpet, like, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, and I know this was like in Ireland, so it's not like even an old apartment in Ireland
It's going to be
is
a lot
like a
older than
100
one
years
here. Yeah.
older, yeah, than anything we've ever set foot
Yeah.
in, let alone lived in. But I could feel the student housingness of it.
Yeah. I ended up taking this out from the library again, like just before the start of the weekend, because I was like, if we're gonna read quotes, like I wanna get this book. But I remembered this one part, and it's when they're first moving into the apartment together. And because James, he's gay, but he's closeted when they first meet. And then he eventually does come out to her. They're in the process of like moving all their stuff in. And she says something like, it strikes me now that if James was really invested in me thinking he was heterosexual, he would never let me go through his iPod. The selection was an odd mishmash, somewhere between middle-aged straight man and middle-aged gay one. Cher snuggled next to Creedence Clearwater Revival. The Eagles next to Elton John. The only thing even slightly of our generation was Britney Spears. And then she says, I settled on Cecilia by Simon and Garfunkel, which that's like a Lottie's classic, by the way. Like totally like have had some just times of my life dancing to that song under the lights of Lottie. She says, I had no reason except for the word jubilation, which was repeated throughout. And it was exactly how I felt, although I was far too shy to admit it. And then she says, the feeling lasted 2 minutes and 55 seconds, wherein Cecilia ended and immediately started again. And then at one point, they're like in their respective bedrooms. And then like they would just like lean their heads out and like sing lyrics to each other and then lean their heads back in. And I was like, oh God, that just so encapsulates that feeling of just jubilation with
Yeah.
this person that you just love and are friends with.
Yeah. And as much as I did enjoy the first half of that book, the second half, I think, is when I finally was like, oh, now we are cooking
Yeah.
with gas.
Yeah.
I liked the first part. And I think it's to go back to that Dolly Alderton reference in the acknowledgments where she says, not every moment needs to be cinematic or something like that.
Mhm.
And
Or little moments can be cinematic
yeah,
or
that's
yeah.
right. It's the exact opposite of what I just said, in fact. But yeah, like it was just sort of like like you were describing. It just felt like I was kind of hanging out in that moment in my life. But then I did get to a point where I was like, okay, I know something big is coming, so let's make it happen.
And then it happens.
And then it happened, and it was wonderful. And actually, earlier today, I finished Green Dot by Madeline Gray. And Madeline Gray should also be part of Monica's WhatsApp group, as far as I'm concerned. So should we. But anyway, that's
Yeah,
neither
I
here
know,
nor
it's
there.
so true. Mm.
But I feel like she's also like in that same vein, that they would all be lovely friends. But both of those books, so Green Dot and The Rachel Incident, have these horrible, cringy dinner party moments. Cringy dinner parties, like,
It's like
the
your jam. Mhm.
yeah, the dinner party in that Rachel Incident. Oh man.
Painful. So painful. And then just the way that it then deals with like such serious subject matter, really illuminating for me because like there was things I found out in that book that I had no idea. Like I had no idea that abortion was illegal in Ireland until 2018.
I know.
And then like what the process was if you were someone who was in need of an abortion, and what that looked like if you were someone who was living in Ireland, and like what you would have to do. It brought together so many elements. It was an excellent must-read book, truly. Top read of the year so far.
Yeah. Oh, 100% agree.
And I stumbled on Goodreads, and she had commented on one of her own books on Goodreads to, review it. And she was like, it's a banger. I'd read this. I wrote this and I'd read this. And I was like, this is great. I like this person a lot.
Yeah. They need to hang out with us, or we need to hang out with them.
Yeah. And she has an excellent Instagram. My God. Really swoon worthy. I'm like, can I just hang out?
I have no tattoos, but her tattoos, I'm like, man, I was like, those are amazing.
When you get your hair, after you get your hair cut, you're going to go to the local tattoo parlor and be like, I just got my hair done.
It's like the Monica
I see, and I think I want the Caroline O'Donoghue tattoo. Yeah.
Sarah, I loved this. I love you. This is so much fun.
This is awesome. I'm always down for a good banter, and you're like top person that I love to banter with that I've ever met in my entire life. So
that's what we should get tattoos of. Best banterers, not like best friends. Best book banterers.
Oh, I love the alliteration, my friends.
Bam. Good night.
All right. Until next time, my friend. Love ya.
Love ya.